Hello, I'm Nadia Jani and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered talks for the release of hostages and approved a major assault on Gaza City. The Trump administration issues sanctions on networks, vessels for dealing in Iranian oil. Aliyev and Berdi Mohammadov hold regional cooperation talks in Turkmenbashi. First this evening, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered talks for the release of hostages and approved a major assault on Gaza City. The move comes as Israel prepares to intensify operations despite international calls for a ceasefire.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Thursday that Israel will start talks on freeing hostages and ending the war. Speaking to soldiers near the Gaza border, Netanyahu confirmed that he had reviewed and was preparing to approve military plans for a full-scale assault on Gaza City.
I
greatly appreciate the presence of the reserve soldiers and, of course, the regular army for this vital goal. At the same time, I have issued instructions to begin immediate negotiations for the release of all our hostages and an end to the war on terms acceptable to Israel.
His remarks marked Israel's first response to a ceasefire plan put forward by Egypt and Qatar earlier this week, which Hamas has already accepted. The proposal calls for a 60-day truce, the release of 10 hostages and 18 bodies held in Gaza in exchange for about 200 Palestinian prisoners. Once the temporary ceasefire begins, both sides would then negotiate toward a permanent agreement, including the release of the remaining captives. At the same time, Israel has moved forward with military preparations. On Wednesday, the army called up 60,000 reservists and extended 20,000 more, signaling Israel's readiness to press ahead with the Gaza City offensive despite international pressure to stop.
Thousands of Israelis took to the streets in Tel Aviv on Thursday night in one of the largest protests since the war began. They're demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu strike a deal with Hamas to end the conflict and bring home the 50 hostages.
Thousands of Israelis are trying to pressure Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reach an agreement with Hamas to end the war and release the remaining hostages in Gaza. They protested in Tel Aviv to support the families of the captives Thursday night. Demonstrators waved Israeli flags and carried photographs of hostages as they marched towards Israel's Defense Ministry headquarters in capital city.
We're here today and almost every day because we have hostages still in Gaza, 50 hostages, 1 woman and 49 men. 20 of them are alive. We hope they're all alive and we want them back, and they're not back yet. So we'll keep coming here and asking the government to have a deal and get them to come back.
I think it's about time that we make a deal with the Hamas. An old deal for all the people, not a partial deal, an old deal for all the hostages, for all the 50 hostages who are still staying old in Gaza. I think the world doesn't understand that the Hamas has the key. He has the key of the end of the war. If we want to end the war, the simple thing is to free the hostages, and the Israeli public won't let Netanyahu to continue to make war. I'm sure about that.
Netanyahu said on Thursday that Israel would immediately resume negotiations for the release of all hostages and an end to the nearly 2-year-old war, but on terms acceptable to Israel. It was Netanyahu's first response to a temporary ceasefire proposal put forward by Egypt and Qatar that Hamas accepted on Monday.
Now to Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that Russia launched a massive attack overnight using 574 drones and 40 missiles. In his evening address, he said Ukrainian forces intercepted a large portion of the assault, but some strikes still hit civilian targets, including an American-owned household appliance factory. Zelensky also shared his views on the two potential peace talk formats.
There are two negotiation formats which realistically can bring progress, and one of these is to meet at the leadership level. A bilateral format of Ukraine-Russia, and a trilateral one, Ukraine-US-Russia. We discussed that in Washington. Putin talked about that during his call to President Trump. Now what we hear from Russia is just, truth be told, simply indecent. They are trying to get away from the need to hold a meeting. They don't want to end this war. They carry on with massive strikes on Ukraine and very tough assaults on the front line, and even launch missiles on an American company similar to many of other absolutely civilian targets of ours.
Ukrainian forces have struck a key oil hub in Russia's Bryansk region. The oil hub is part of the critical Dogsba pipeline supplying crude oil to Hungary and Slovakia. The strike, confirmed by drone footage and thermal hotspots, triggered a massive blaze. Hungary's foreign minister warned it's a direct hit to energy security as both countries rely heavily on this route. In response, officials say deliveries may be suspended for up to 5 days as repairs begin, while Ukraine continues targeting Russian energy infrastructure to weaken the Kremlin's war funding. Russian forces have conducted an exercise in the Baltic Sea, including drills to prevent an underwater attack. The Russian Defense Ministry published a video of Russian Navy Commander Admiral Alexander Moiseyev inspecting the Baltic exercise. The drills were aimed partly at assessing the Navy's anti-submarine sabotage defense units. It was the second time this month that Russia has held naval exercises with an anti-submarine component. The Trump administration imposed new sanctions that target 4 International Criminal Court judges and 8 vessels accused of facilitating Iranian oil exports that violate existing measures. The US Treasury blacklisted networks linked to Greek national Antonios Margaritis, along with shipping firms in Hong Kong and the Marshall Islands, while the State Department sanctioned 2 Chinese oil storage operators. The move comes in the middle of a stalled nuclear talks with Tehran, saying conditions are not yet in place for effective negotiations with Washington. Spanish protesters in the northern region of Galicia are demanding stronger wildfire prevention measures after this year's blaze burnt at least 400,000 hectares, the largest amount on record since 2006. Here's more.
Demonstrators in Spain's northern Galicia region have taken to the streets to protest against the government's handling of devastating wildfires. In the city of Orense, crowds held placards reading "Forest fires never again" and accused the ruling Popular Party of failing to act effectively. Spain's Labour Minister Yolanda Díaz joined a rally calling for countermeasure policies and better working conditions for firefighters. The protests come as southern Europe faces one of its worst wildfire seasons in 2 decades.
We need fire prevention policies throughout the year. We need the hills to be clean. We need to promote extensive herding. To have sheep and goats is key to have rich forests, and also to fight what we are seeing today. Once and for all, we need to finish with single-crop farming in our country and parts of our region. We are very familiar with it in Galicia.
Spain is still battling major blazes in western and northern regions after a 16-day heat wave. Weather conditions eased on Thursday, with lower temperatures and higher humidity, helping firefighters control 18 large fires. But despite the improvement, a new blaze broke out in Santa Cristina de Cobres, sending thick smoke into the sky. The government has deployed about 3,400 troops and 50 aircraft across the country. International support has also arrived, with firefighters, vehicles and aircraft sent from several European nations, including France, Germany and Finland. Authorities estimate that more than 382,000 hectares have already burned this year, an area larger than the island of Mallorca. It is the largest amount of land destroyed by fire since records began in 2006 and 4 times higher than the long-term average.
Southwestern Japan is grappling with floods and mudslides as Typhoon Lingling weakens a tropical depression. Japan's meteorological agency warns of heavy rain and for residents to stay alert.
Although Typhoon Lingling has weakened to a tropical depression on Friday, it brought southwestern Japan a record amount of rainfall with it on Thursday. According to local media, Kagoshima City recorded 325 millimeters of rain in 24 hours, causing severe street flooding and waterlogging. Minasatsuma City received 315 millimeters during the same period, marking the highest August rainfall since records began. The Japan Meteorological Agency said the typhoon made landfall in Kagoshima Prefecture on Thursday and warned of potential landslides, river overflows and flooding, particularly across southern Kyushu. 5 mudslides were reported in Ichikiku Shikino City, but no injuries have been reported. Lingling is moving slowly northeast, with the threat of more heavy rain and flooding, especially across Kagoshima Prefecture. Authorities have urged residents to stay vigilant.
After the break, we'll discuss the latest on Israel and Gaza and a possible ceasefire. Stay with us.
History behind, China's rapid growth is reshaping the world economy and alliances.
既不能让中美脱钩，也不能够让中国在全球产供链里面失去它的。
We no longer have a unipolar world anymore.
中间走了呢，这个是这几年中国跟中亚国家跟南高加索国家比较热议的一个话题。这个中间走了呢。
China is first manufacturing nation in the world. Europe needs China's goods.
From here, rail lines and trade routes stretch westward through Central Asia and the South Caucasus, linking China with Europe.
目前我们从西安发出的这个中欧专列，能够覆盖“一带一路”沿线40多个国家和地区。
Our strategic and vision in Azerbaijan is in Azerbaijan for Azerbaijan.
It's a journey that is transforming not only China, but the way the world moves together.
Welcome back to A News. Turning to the war in Gaza, Israel's defense minister says Gaza City will be destroyed if Hamas does not agree to disarm and release all hostages. The comments come after the Israeli cabinet approved plans for a massive assault on Gaza City, despite widespread international and domestic opposition. Alongside this, the UN has declared full-blown famine in Gaza, saying more than 500,000 Palestinians are facing catastrophic famine conditions, which include starvation, destitution and death. Now, to help us unpack this, I'm now joined by political analyst Tom Gross. Good evening.
Good evening.
Tom, my first question to you is, famine has now been declared in Gaza. How concerned should we be about this now?
Well, we should be very concerned about the fact this war is still continuing and many people are suffering, and we should hope this war will finish as soon as possible and indeed that Hamas will be removed from power. But we should also be concerned about something else, which is that the UN is meant to be an accurate and reliable organization, and it is not. The same man who made these famine accusations at a press conference a couple of hours ago, he's called Tom Fletcher, the Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs, just 3 months ago on May 20th, he told the BBC that 10,000 babies in Gaza would die within 48 hours. It was a completely fabricated claim. It's one of many such claims. He walked it back 10 days later on May 30th this year. So you'd be forgiven for taking with a pinch of salt his highly exaggerated and inaccurate claims, and indeed Israel says they're fabricated. That's not to say we shouldn't be concerned with the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It's very bleak indeed. But at the same time, it's important not to simply make things up, as the UN officials appear to be doing.
Okay, well, we don't actually have anyone from the UN to actually support those claims or to refute them. But what I was going to say in all of this is that Israel's foreign ministry has rejected this particular report, most probably based on what you've just advised. But despite the IPC saying more than 500,000 people are on the strip facing starvation, why do you think that is? Because humanitarian aid, it has been quite hard to get that to the Palestinian people.
Well, there was a period from about March until May when less food was going in because Israel was trying to stop Hamas using the food supplies to sell and booster their money that they use to pay salaries to gunmen and procure more arms and so on. But in the last 2 or 3 months, masses of food have gone in. So, and this is confirmed for sure. So it's very suspicious that the UN should today suddenly declare that there's going to be an imminent famine, especially in Gaza City. I suspect it is an attempt to pressure Israel not to invade or go into Gaza City, as they said they will do in the coming days. So there are two different issues that we should separate. One is it wise for Israel to go into Gaza City, or is it wise to leave Hamas in control there? What is the best for the Palestinians, for Israel and everyone else? A separate issue is whether the UN is being honest in declaring a famine, which is a very serious thing to do. They've only declared 4 famines in the whole world in recent decades. The others were in Sudan and Somalia. They didn't, for example, declare famine in Yemen, where there was definitely a widespread famine, and various other places where there were definitely widespread famine, but they don't seem very interested in it. So it seems a political decision, not a humanitarian decision, by the UN humanitarian chief, because he's trying to pressure Israel to call off its Gaza invasion. Now, as you said in your earlier question, there's huge division here in Israel on whether it's the right thing to do, not just morally, but also tactically, whether this will help Israel win the war and get Hamas out of power and get the Israeli hostages back. And there are divided opinions on this, and there are good arguments for and against.
Yes, and with that information about whether or not humanitarian aid has been stifled or taken by Hamas, that actually hasn't been founded yet. But what I was going to bring up is that the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, is calling for unrestricted humanitarian access to Gaza. because he's saying that there's a failing of humanity in itself, what do you make of this? Do you feel that not enough humanitarian aid is getting through to those who need it?
No, they're two different points. Israel says there's masses of humanitarian aid, but Hamas is taking it and holding it back. And just as it's used some of its own civilians as so-called human shields, in other words, life is cheap for the overall jihadi cause. Remember, Hamas is a member, is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, a self-declared jihadi organization, and they're literally saying that people who die are martyrs and they should be happy to be martyrs because it's for the greater cause of establishing an Islamic State in Gaza. So the one issue is whether there's enough aid going in. Separately with the UN, sorry to be cynical, but the UN is also an organization with a lot of money and a lot of jobs. And the UN have worked hand in hand these past 20 years of Hamas rule in Gaza to basically also, supply themselves with lots of nice fat cat salaries, and they stay in very fancy hotels, at least before the war, in Gaza City, and they drive around in nice cars and so on. What they don't want to do is allow this aid to be distributed through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which will give the aid directly to Palestinian civilians rather than through the UN. And the UN, it's a big money-making operation. I know this sounds a bit cynical, and we'd all like to believe the UN is only a force for good. But unfortunately, when one looks at the UN, not just in the Middle East, but at various conflicts in Africa and so on, it's rife with corruption, like many other international bodies. And I don't say this lightly. I realize it's a very serious accusation to make, and it's based on years of observation, experience, and so on. I don't make such a serious accusation lightly.
Yes, and Mr. Gross, just on that, obviously we don't have anyone from the UN to kind of push back on that, and obviously to find whether or not your claims are correct. So I understand that, but we're just going to slightly move on. My other question to you was, what does this now mean for Israel's position on the global stage with everyone watching what they're doing? How does Israel look to others?
Well, Israel suffered reputational damage, particularly in Europe and other democracies like Australia and Canada, less so in the Arab, actually a conference last week with people from throughout the Arab world, and they were saying that they think the Gaza situation gets too much attention, and they were looking at conflicts that have many more fatalities, like in Sudan, which is a partly Arab-speaking country, in Yemen and elsewhere. But certainly in Europe, we see all these pro-Palestinian marches, we see calls for boycotts. One particular shocking incident in Italy 2 days ago, 2 doctors in a hospital near Arezzo, Abruzzo, filmed themselves destroying 2 medicines made by Teva, which is an Israeli drug company. It's one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical companies. In other words, they would rather destroy life-saving medicines to make a political point than treat their patients in Italy. I should point out the Italian government and other authorities in Italy are furious, and they may prosecute these doctors criminally. But my question is, the fact that doctors thought it was a good idea to film themselves and put it on social media, destroying medicines they were meant to use to treat their own patients in Italy, just to make a political point against the state of Israel, shows just how much anger, hatred, prejudice, whatever you want to call it, against Israel there is. Now, of course, Israel is fighting a war, and Palestinian civilians have died in this war, and there's understandable anxiety and anguish about the situation in Gaza. However, questions in Israel are, there are many wars and conflicts around the world. Why are there no demonstrations, for example, on the streets of London for freeing Tibet? Why does the British Foreign Secretary, for example, not make statements about Uyghur Muslims who are in virtual concentration camp like slave labor camp type conditions in China? And, there are about 130 other conflicts, or there are other peoples, or there are states all around the world. Why does this particular conflict get so much attention? So
Mr. Gross,
some people would say, Yes, sorry, please.
Yes, sorry. I want to make sure you get your point across. We don't have that much time left. I just wanted to bring this last question to your attention. Sorry about that. My question is, how hopeful are you that this will, finally come to an end, that there is an end in sight for both Israelis and Palestinians?
Well, either if Israel goes into Gaza City, either Hamas might crumble. It's the last remaining Hamas stronghold, after which there'll be peace, hopefully, and there'll be rebuilding, and there'll be plenty of improvement of the humanitarian situation. So that could happen. Or alternatively, things could drag on for a long time. It's very hard to say what outcome will come from the next few days. But, this may be an end game to this horrible war that's been going on since October 2023, almost 2 years.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your insight and for joining us this evening. Tom Gross, thank you.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll look at key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.
Ready to welcome everyone to come to Gabela and to make unforgettable memories.
Welcome to Gabela rafting.
This territory is the most important place in our history. Our ancestors lived here 2,000 years ago, and they had here amazing culture, amazing civilization.
There's something for everyone here. This place is the largest amusement park in Azerbaijan.
Our guests love to have meal in this atmosphere.
Yeah.
You see you're in nature, you're in the forest, and the good food.
6 tons, 579 liters.
And it's a lot of wine.
And biggest cask in the world.
Bandar is not just a holiday destination. It's a symbol of Azerbaijan's growing tourism potential.
The doors are open. Welcome to Gabela, Azerbaijan.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. We are going to take a closer look at the stories shaping the region. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev met with Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, chairman of Halk Maslahati of Turkmenistan, in the city of Turkmenbashi on Friday. Berdimuhamedov welcomed Aliyev. He highlighted cooperation potential in energy, transport, trade and cultural exchange, noting strong prospects for expanding bilateral ties. Aliyev thanked him for the invitation and hospitality, calling Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan brotherly states united by shared history and traditions. The leaders reaffirmed mutual support in international organizations. Berdimuhamedov congratulated Aliyev on progress in normalizing Azerbaijan-Armenia relations. The discussion also touched on the potential of a transport corridor involving Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. We are now joined by Orhan, who is in Turkmenistan.
Hello, I'm joining you from Avaza, very lovely, stunning and very picturesque place on the eastern shore of the Caspian Sea in western Turkmenistan. Today is a very important day in the history of three Turkic nations, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan. Trilateral format involving these three countries is emerging, as has been officially announced today. Today can be described as a day of two bilaterals and one trilateral. Earlier in the morning, the national leader of Turkmenistan and the chairman of the Halk Maslahati, the highest consultative body of the nation, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, received President Ilham Aliyev. They held bilateral talks, first for one-on-one meeting, and then the second meeting was with the participation of expanded delegations. Similar format meeting took place involving the leader of Turkmenistan and the president of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, and then there was a trilateral meeting. Number of important memoranda of understanding were signed, both of bilateral and also trilateral nature, related to the areas of connectivity, energy, transit and many other related areas. And also leaders gave their remarks. They made their remarks during their press briefing, news conference. President Aliyev specifically mentioned the contribution of Uzbekistan into Azerbaijan's Karabakh region, making reference to the school established there and also, of course, sewing factory which was established some time ago. And also he paid his tribute to the leader of Turkmenistan for the latest contribution to the mosque in Fizuli. And then trilateral joint declaration was signed, and in a moment or so the Turkmen Horse Show will kick off here in Avaza, and of course we'll be back with our analysis, with our reports. Orhan Amashov, Javid Aliyev, A News.
Azerbaijan's Sokar will invest $7 billion in Turkey's petrochemical sector, reinforcing its role as the country's largest foreign investor. Our correspondent Aliyah Aziz brings us the details.
Ankara says Azerbaijan's Sokar is preparing a $7 billion petrochemical investment in Turkey, a move Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz says will support major growth and macroeconomic stability. He says that preliminary engineering is complete under Turkey's master plan, and the government hopes the project will move forward as soon as possible, arguing that every dollar of domestic output will help narrow the current account shortages. Sokar is Turkey's biggest foreign investor, with over $18 billion in energy, petrochemicals, and logistics. Its portfolio includes Petchem, acquired in 2008, which operates 16 plants, producing 2 million tons of petrochemicals yearly, about 11% of Turkey's demand, and the advanced Star refinery in Izmir. Sokar states the new capacity plan, approved in December, may be phased in over 5 to 10 years. This industrial build-out also ties into Turkey's 2053 net zero agenda. Yılmaz points to R&D, including sustainable aviation fuel, as a way to decarbonize heavy industry while lifting export competitiveness. Regionally, Ankara frames energy as a strategy. Yilmaz highlighted closer coordination with Baku on boosting Azerbaijani gas flows and opening the door for Turkmen gas to be transferred through Azerbaijan and Turkey. He also mentioned the new gas supply to Syria, routed through Turkey, to restart power plants with 1,200 megawatts of capacity, converting gas to electricity as part of Syria's reconstruction push. The next steps include site selection and financing for the new complex, alongside deeper Turkey-Azerbaijan cooperation on energy and regional connectivity. For A News, this is Aliya Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
Turkey has laid the foundation for a major railway linking Kars, Igdur, Aralık and Dilalucu. Transport and Infrastructure Minister Abdulkadir Uralulu says the line will serve as the key to opening the Zangezur corridor. He called the project both geopolitical and geostrategic, boosting trade, strengthening cooperation in the South Caucasus and supporting peace.
Over the past 23 years, Turkey has invested $300 billion in transport infrastructure, with $64 billion allocated to railways. In 2025, an additional 3,000 kilometers of new track have been added, bringing our total railway length to 14,000 kilometers. This railway will make a major contribution to regional and global trade. The project once again proves Turkey's mission of mediation and its contribution to peace. Turkey is presenting a vision that considers the future of the global economy. Kars will be the Iron Gateway, Ida will become a global trade hub, while Aralık and Dilalucu will be the key to the Zangezur corridor. The Kars, Ida, Aralık, Dilalucu railway line is more than a transport project. It is a road of unity, prosperity and peace that will resonate internationally. This route will strengthen economic cooperation in the South Caucasus, accelerate the opening of borders and speed up the normalization of diplomatic relations.
Staying with Turkey, the country announced that passport-based crossings have officially begun at its land border gates with Syria. It's part of the normalization process following the country's liberation last December. Here's more.
The Turkish Ministry of Interior has announced a new decision on border crossing regulations with Syria. Turkish citizens and Syrian nationals who have obtained third country citizenship will be able to enter and exit Syria through Turkey's land border gates with a passport. Only exception here is about those located in the Operation Peace Spring Zone. This part of decision is explained by the security concerns. Before the Syrian civil war, under a visa-free agreement signed in 2009, Turkish people could travel to Syria with just an ID card. However, the crossings were tightened due to the conflict that began in 2011. New decision was made as part of the normalization process between Turkey and Syria. Turkey became the first country to reopen its embassy in Damascus after the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad. Since the embassy reopened on December 15th, reciprocal diplomatic visits and talks have intensified. The introduction of passport-based decision between Turkey and Syria is expected to positively affect on logistics as well. Earlier this month, the Turkish trade minister said that Aleppo will become a strong logistics hub and Syria's transport corridors will become active again.
Iran launched its first military exercise since the end of its 12-day war with Israel. State television reported this on Thursday. A video shared by the Iranian military showed Navy vessels launching missiles at targets in the sea in the Gulf of Oman and the Indian Ocean. Iran state media reported that the Sustainable Power 1404 exercises aims to enhance combat capabilities, improve operational command and control, and create deterrence through domestic capabilities. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has arrived in the Kyrgyz Republic for an official visit. At Manas International Airport, he was welcomed by Kyrgyz President Said Japarov. The leaders are set to hold bilateral talks on key issues of cooperation and attend the 7th meeting of the Supreme Interstate Council of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Afghanistan and Kazakhstan are strengthening cooperation in the health sector. Kabul's Minister of Public Health met with the ambassador of Kazakhstan in Kabul to discuss ways of expanding medical support and training opportunities. Our correspondent Turkmenbashi has more.
The Minister of Public Health met with the ambassador of Kazakhstan in Kabul, where both sides discussed improving the skills of Afghan healthcare workers, expanding services in remote areas, providing hospital equipment, and sharing expertise in controlling infectious diseases. The minister stressed that Afghanistan is working to build general hospitals in over 300 districts, with the goal of reducing maternal and child mortality and ensuring equal access to healthcare across the country. He called on Kazakhstan to support these efforts either by providing equipment or investing in the construction of hospitals, particularly in northern Afghanistan. The ambassador reaffirmed Kazakhstan's commitment, calling Afghanistan a friendly partner, and pledged training opportunities for Afghan doctors and nurses, as well as sending technical teams to support joint programs. This meeting reflects broader bilateral ties between the two nations. Kazakhstan has been active in Afghanistan through trade, education, and humanitarian aid, including wheat exports and scholarships for Afghan students. Health cooperation now adds another dimension in this relationship, as both countries seek to expand mutual engagement. Officials on both sides say the new initiatives mark an important step in strengthening Afghanistan-Kazakhstan relations, with healthcare emerging as a key area of focus for future cooperation. This is Turkmenbashi in Kabul for A News.
Rapidly falling water levels in the Caspian Sea are disrupting ports, raising shipping costs and endangering marine life, Azerbaijani officials say. Deputy of Ecology Minister Raf Hajiev told Reuters the sea has dropped nearly 1 metre in the past 5 years and 2.5 metres over 30 years. He said the receding coastline is hurting coastal communities. Azerbaijan and Russia have set up a joint working group and plan to approve a monitoring programme in September. After the break, we'll take a look at this in more detail with an expert on the subject. Stay with us.
History behind, China's rapid growth is reshaping the world's economy and alliances.
既不能让中美脱钩，也不能够让中国在全球产供链里面失去它的。
We no longer have a unipolar world anymore.
中间走了呢，这个是这几年中国跟中亚国家跟南高加索国家比较热议的一个话题。这个中间走了呢。
China is first manufacturing nation in the world. Europe needs China's goods.
From here, rail lines and trade routes stretch westward through Central Asia and the South Caucasus, linking China with Europe.
目前我们从西安发出的这个中欧班列，能够覆盖“一带一路”沿线40多个国家和地区。
Our strategic and vision in Azerbaijan is in Azerbaijan for Azerbaijan.
It's a journey that is transforming not only China, but the way the world moves together.
Welcome back to A News. Now, to explore the causes, consequences and possible solutions of the receding Caspian Sea, I'm now joined by Osama Rizvi, an energy and economic analyst from Pakistan. Good evening.
Thank you so much for having me today.
My first question is, how concerned should we be about the falling sea levels?
I think it is indeed a big concern, because if we look at various studies being done, this is happening since 1970s, and according to other studies, like, we can lose around 9 to 18 meters further till the end of the century, which would essentially wipe off a third of the Caspian Sea, and the result would be catastrophic, not only for from the economic point of view, but also for the 15 million or so people living around the coastal areas, and the future of the Central Asia as well.
And what has caused this decline? What can we do about it, to stop that?
I think, like, there are multiple reasons for this decline in water levels and the shrinking of the sea. The climate, of course, is the first one. Rising temperatures. I believe there was a recent study that said the average temperature in that region has risen by 1.4 degrees. That's huge. Similarly, evaporation. I think more water is now evaporated as much as is provided by the different rivers. Then there is the building of dams, and also the control of important rivers like Volga rivers and other rivers for the purpose of agriculture and industry. So all of these factors have combined into what is happening right now, and it needs to be, corrective measures should be taken as soon as possible.
And who do you think is impacted most by the shallowing of the Caspian Sea?
I believe, as I said, like 15 million people, first of all. Then the main industries like fisheries. So, for instance, Caspian Sea upholds around $500 million of fishery industries, and also oil infrastructure and oil flows. So all of the stakeholders, from people to companies and to governments, they stand to lose a lot.
And how significant is the Caspian Sea to global trade?
Well, it is one of the most important trade routes, at least on the regional terms, because most of the trade from here goes into the maritime highway that is called Indian Ocean and others. Even, right now, in terms of its potential, it has around 50 billion barrels of oil, around 8 trillion cubic feet of gas, and $2 billion of oil infrastructure is there. Lots of tankers passes through. I think Kazakhstan's 10% of exports pass through this. So it's quite significant in global trade terms. And what is important is that Central Asia is going to become even more integrated in the global trade network. And this shrinking of the river of the sea can impede such a progress.
And in regards to that, so what does that mean for the surrounding economies of the Caspian countries if it's going to hit
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Seems to be an issue with the sound. I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. My question was, what does that mean for the economies of Caspian countries?
I think, as I said, Central Asian economies, Azerbaijan and especially surrounding Caspian Sea, they intend to play a very important role in the future, but the presence of a water body, always is beneficial. And if it shrinks further, if they lose the transit routes, if they lose, for instance, now Kazakhstan has to dredge more for the ports to work. They're already relocating port. For instance, their oil terminal in Azerbaijan that has already started to see a fall in oil production from 860 barrels per day in 2024 to 810,000 barrels per day in 2025. So they're losing on important commodity and economic gains, and there needs to be sort of a water governance system or a water governance body by all the 4 and 5 countries surrounding the water body, so that this this process can be stopped before it gets out of control.
Okay, so basically by these bordering countries coming together to tackle this issue, do you think that it could reverse itself?
If not reverse, then at least it can stop it from getting worse. Of course, there are scientific measures and other technical things that can be used to reverse such a damage, but it will take time, it will involve funding, and most of all, above all, it would involve the political will and a legal regulatory system for it to happen. And unfortunately, these things tend to take a lot of time, which we don't have at the moment.
Well, Russia and Azerbaijan have said that they will hold talks about this in September to provide a monitoring aspect in regards to that. Is that a positive step in the right direction?
Indeed, the last time such multilateral talks happened, I think it was back in 2003. So the alacrity, the willingness of important regional players to engage in diplomatic dialogue for this common good problem that concerns all of us actually is a very positive step. What remains to be seen is that whether it will be just rhetoric or whether there will be some actual steps that would be materialized at some point in the near future.
Definitely. And do you see any diplomatic challenges with that at all?
In terms of the diplomatic challenges, I don't think there should be any. Why? Because as we have discussed, every country has this isn't a win-win proposition. I mean, a win-lose proposition. It is a win-win proposition if they work together diplomatically and technologically and in terms of capacity enhancement of each other's capacities. I think it should be a win-win for everyone, because if they do not, nobody is going to come out as a winner. Everyone needs this, the Caspian Sea, and not only the country, the region, but also the world, specifically the Eastern Hemisphere. So that no diplomatic issue can hinder this progress.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Osama. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.